Well, I told you guys not to expect a lot of happy stuff this week. Maybe that's why everyone stayed home. But we are going to put a happy spin on it because every one of us hates to feel like we don't know something, right? There's not a single person, I don't guess, that enjoys feeling like they're in a situation where they don't know the outcome, right? How many of you like to know what's going to happen before it happens? If I could tell you how tomorrow was going to turn out right now, probably everyone in this room would say, I will take that information. And then we would try to plan accordingly so we could change it, right? Let's be honest. That's probably why God doesn't say, here's what's going to happen tomorrow. Because the thing that you and I say with our mouths is that God has a plan for our life, right? And we say things like, God knows everything, right? And then we want to change it, right? That's a little harder to confess right there, but that's the truth. We all believe God knows everything. God has a plan for our life, and that is great. God, let's change it. And so today, what I hope we see is that we do not serve a God of coincidence. And if you don't get anything else from what I mean, don't shut off right now. But that's the thing I want you to walk out of here today, is that you do not serve a God of coincidence. How many of you have said or hear people say, if something good happens, you say, well, I'm just lucky. Tommy Green does not believe in luck. Luck does not exist. We say things like, luck is being prepared for the right thing at the right time, and then we call that lucky. But I don't believe in luck. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe that things happen for a reason. We find ourselves in situations because of a reason. I think I told you guys once before that in my first church I had two ladies that were about the same age, and I just thought the world of them. I mean, we were all friends, and because I had such a close relationship with them, I could tell them exactly what I thought. I could, pull off the filter, because as the preacher, you've got to be really nice and kind when you say things. Well, with them, I could pull that filter off and just tell them how the goat ate the cabbage. So they sat in my office one day, all upset because their lives were falling apart again. Did you notice that? Again, and again. And again, and again, and again. And so one of them looked at me and she said, Tommy, I just cannot figure out for the life of me why these bad things always happen to us. And without even thinking, it's just, words just started coming out. I looked at them and I said, have you ever stopped to think it's the decisions you guys make? You guys make the worst decisions of any two people I've ever known in my life. And they just kind of looked at each other. Like, did he say that? And then the next look that they gave each other was, he said that, and he's probably right. We don't make very good decisions. So we try to blame things on coincidence all the time. We try to think, oh, wow, that's amazing. Or we don't even pay attention to the way things are happening. So today, I want us to look at Genesis chapter 37. We'll close out this chapter today and see that we do not serve a God of coincidence. So beginning verse 12. Now remember from last week, we've got Joseph and his brothers loved him, right? No, that's the exact opposite. Brothers could not stand Joseph. Joseph was the next to the youngest, and yet he was his father's favorite. His father had no intention of him being hands-on in the family business, right? And by hands-on, I mean actually doing the work. So his dad gave him the job of, you're in charge. And he's got older brothers. So verse 12, he says, Then his brothers went to pasture their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, Are not your brothers pasturing the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send you to them. And he said, I will go. Then he said, Go now and see about the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the flock, and bring word back to me. Now, what got him in trouble at the very beginning of chapter 37? It was a bad report that he gave his dad about his brothers. So his dad says, Go again. So he goes off to find them. So he went from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. Verse 15, And a man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, What are you looking for? Now, it's hard for us to grasp this, when we talk about this Hebrew word translated wandering, Joseph was lost. Did you get that? He was lost. He didn't know. I mean, he was there to look for his brothers. He knew where his brothers were supposed to be. Let me read it again. A man found him. And he was wandering in the field. So it'd be like today, we got some deer hunters. Not here, they're all out hunting. But we got some of you guys have deer hunted. It'd be like being out in the middle of the woods, not during deer season when you would expect to find somebody else. But it'd be like being out there in the middle of the woods in June or July and you're lost and somebody's just out there. So what's the chances of that? Slim. Why is somebody out there in the middle of your deer lease in July? It says, and a man found him. He says, I'm looking for my brothers. Please tell me where they're pasturing the flock. And the man said, they've moved from here, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. Dothan's 14 miles away. Now Shechem is 50 miles from Joseph's house. So he has gone 50 miles to find his brothers where they're supposed to be. Can't find them anywhere. He is wandering around in circles. Just happens across a guy who just happened to overhear his brothers say, we're going to Dothan to pasture our flocks there. 14 more miles away. Now what's the chances, you think, if Joseph doesn't run across this guy, what's the chances that he's going to find his brothers? 0 chance. Never going to cross his mind to go. All right. Verse 18. When they saw him from a distance, and before he came close to them, they plotted against him to put to death. They said to him, here comes that dreamer. Let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits, and we'll say a wild beast devoured him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. So he's sitting around talking. You guys have seen this on these drama shows. When they'll say, they got somebody in the courtroom and they're on trial for murder. And they're like, did you ever say, I'll kill you? You're like, well, yeah, I said it, but I didn't mean it. I was just talking. So I'm pretty sure that's how this conversation starts. They're just sitting around this campfire eating, and here he comes, and they're like, you know what we ought to do? We ought to just kill him. He makes me so mad. Dad likes him more than all the rest of us. He just ruins our life. He's always having these dreams saying that we're going to have to bow down and we're going to worship him or we're going to serve him. He's going to be in charge of us, however they wanted to interpret it. Let's just kill him. So they begin talking, and then we get this mob mentality. What happens with the mob? Not like the mafia, but a mob. Is what started off as just some words by one person takes root in the mind of the mob. The mob itself gets a mind of its own. So no one's thinking clearly at this point. They're just sitting there talking, and the more they talk, the more like it sounds like a great idea. But verse 21, Reuben heard this and rescued him out of his hand, saying, let us not take his life. Now Reuben is the oldest. And there are some questions about why Reuben would do this. Reuben was already kind of in hot water with his dad from back in chapter 35. So that may be one reason. Reuben's thinking, I can get back in good favors with Dad. The other possible reason, if you want to give Reuben a little more benefit of the doubt, is that Reuben realized I'm the oldest and it's my responsibility to look after all my brothers, even the one I don't like. So he says, let's don't kill him. Let's just throw him in the pit. And so his plan was, at the end of verse 22, is that they throw him in the pit and then he would come back, he would rescue him out, take him home. So it came about when Joseph reached his brothers, they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the varicolored tunic that was on him, and they took him and threw him into the pit. Now the pit was empty and without water in it. Then they sat down to eat a meal. And as they raised up their eyes, look, behold, a caravan of Ishmaelites was coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing aromatic gum and balm and myrrh, on their way to bring them down to Egypt. All right, now this is the intercoastal trade route. So it's not uncommon that there would be people traveling that to do trade. It is ironic that at the very time they throw him in the pit and they sit down, they look up and they see some people coming. Does anyone else find that ironic? Kind of coincidental? What did I say earlier? What do I not believe in? I don't believe in coincidences. So they sit down, let's throw him in a pit. Oh wait, here come some people. Judah said to his brothers, what profit is this for us to kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. Then some Midianite traders passed by, so they pulled him out and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. Thus they brought Joseph into Egypt. Now, not only did they pull him out to sell him, but they sold him to their cousins. Remember, Ishmaelites, they are the descendants of Abraham and Hagar. And the Midianites are also children of Abraham. And so these are their second, third cousins. We're not talking about a long distance. These folks are all related. And they sell Joseph. Now Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, so he tore his garments. He returned to his brothers and said, the boy's not there. As for me, where am I going to go? So they took Joseph's tunic and slaughtered a male goat and dipped the tunic in the blood. And they sent the varicolored tunic and brought it to their father and said, we found this. Please examine it to see whether it is your son's tunic or not. Then he examined it and said, it is my son's tunic. The wild beast has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. So Jacob tore his clothes and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. Then all of his sons and all of his daughters arose to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted, and said, surely I will go down to Sheol in the morning for my son, for his father has wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, the captain of the bodyguard. And that last verse is important because it lets the reader know that Joseph's story is not over with. That could have very well been the end of it, right? He's no longer going to be in Canaan. He's no longer going to be under his father's house, under his father's protection. He has been sold into slavery. We don't know where he's going. And yet Moses tells us he made it to Egypt, and he was sold to a specific person, Potiphar, in Pharaoh's army. So let's go back then and examine these two places, excuse me, where it might seem easy to believe in coincidence. Here you have Joseph wandering in the field, and he just happens to run across a guy who just happened to know where his brothers were. Joseph makes it to his brothers. They come up with a plan to kill him. He may very well have died in that pit. We don't know. But we do know that at the time they throw him into the pit, they sat down, and here come some traders. And they sold him not for a large amount of money. This would have been about 2 years' wage for a typical shepherd. But this was the going price of slaves during this time. So there's 10 of them. They're going to split up 20 shekels of silver each. Not a big financial gain for them. Besides that, they're from a very wealthy family. So 20 shekels of silver would have been nothing for them. I mean, you think in terms of Ben Cartwright. Okay, being Jacob. And instead of just having 3 sons, he's got 12 sons. Okay, so they're headed back to the Ponderosa now with the tunic. And he is completely upset. And he says, my son has been torn to pieces. But you and I, as the reader, we know something different. So here's my question for us today. You stop and examine your own life. When do we tend to give God credit? Man, when things are good. You get a promotion at work, you say, wow, God's good to us. You go to the doctor and you get a good report, what do we say? God's good to us. The baby's born and healthy, got all the fingers and toes, God's good to us. All the good times, God's good to us. God's good to us. God's good to us. What do we say when things are bad? Well, it's just some rotten luck. Right? Guys, I want to tell you this right now. God's big enough to take the blame for the bad as well as the good. He can handle it. Because what you and I fail to realize is that a lot of times, whatever we're going through is, and I say a lot of times, all the time, what we're going through is to get us somewhere else. Joseph would have never made it to Egypt without the dreams, right? Without his brothers hating him, right? Without his brothers not staying in Shechem where they were supposed to be, but going on down to Dothan, because that's not where they were supposed to be. So I can imagine little Tommy Green finding his sister and brother somewhere else. Some of the first words I'm going to say is, I'm telling Dad. Right? You'd have done it too. I'm telling Dad. You made me walk an extra 28 miles to find you people when you're not where you're supposed to be. Look at my coat. I got sleeves on my coat. I'm the boss. Without that, let's throw him in the pit. Without that, let's find some slave traders and sell him. Is this a good day for Joseph? This is like a horrible day for Joseph. But you and I know how the story ends already, don't we? What happens if Joseph doesn't get sold into slavery and he doesn't find his way to Egypt? His family starves to death. So it's kind of like we just have to get to the point in our faith where we say, I don't understand this, God. But that's okay. It's above my pay grade. This last week at work, I sat in on my first team meeting. And there are 2 teams in my little area. And so the first team meeting went really smooth. Nobody said much of anything. The second meeting was the actual team that I will be on. And so I may have to carry a knife or something because it got rough. People hollering at each other and all this kind of stuff. I'm just like, my goodness, it's like a business meeting. And so you've got all these people who are griping. And we get back into our little training room and the trainer says, so what do you guys think? And I said, well, I think I figured out the problem. And he said, what's that? I said, all those people who are talking don't realize what their job at this company is. I said, the highest grade that any one of those people can be is a grade 11. That's as high as they can be in that room. And I said, and I've already read the job description for grade 11. And I said, it doesn't give you the right to make any decisions. It gives you the right to clock in and do your job. They don't ask your opinion. They don't ask you to be in charge of anything. They don't ask you to design anything. They don't ask you to fix any problems. You're not in charge of any of that. You just show up and do your job. I said, so I think the real issue is that these folks forgot what pay grade they are. So guess what we do? We forget what pay grade we are, and we assume that we're God. And we assume that we've got it figured out and that we know. Now, does that mean that, that those are good things? No. Getting sold into slavery, never good. Okay? You don't have to turn around and high-five somebody because you got sold into slavery. You don't have to turn around and high-five somebody because you lost your job. You don't have to turn around and high-five somebody because of this, because of that, or because of something else. What we do have to realize, though, is that God has a plan. And that until you go through this, you cannot make it to the next stage of the plan. And when you make it through the next stage of the plan, once you go through it, then you can go to the next stage of the plan. I mean, it's a plan. It's a process. That's the way God works. That's the way He's always worked, and that's the way He will always work. God has a plan for Tommy Green's life, which means there are going to be some days that I go through that are going to be awesome. I'm going to feel good. The weather is going to be nice. I'm going to catch every green light coming through Main Street in Malvern, which is unheard of. Because they let Ellie set the timer on those things. But I'm going to catch every green light that day. No one's going to be in front of me at Walmart. I can just go in, get my stuff, and check out. I mean, there are going to be days like that. Then there are going to be days when the lights are broke and I'm just sitting there because all 4 lights are red and no one's smart enough to turn this into a 4-way stop. And I'm going to go to Walmart and there's going to be 1 checker working and there's going to be 50 people in front of me with 2 shopping carts each and sell papers from other stores because they're competitively shopping. And they're going to refuse to hand their blank check to the cashier. They're going to still write it out. Okay? There are going to be those days too. But God is going to be God on that great day, and God is going to be God on that day that is awful. He is always going to be God. And everything that I go through is to get me to the place where He wants me to be. And here's what's neat, folks, is that the ultimate place for all of us is the same. To be in the image of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. So tomorrow, when you go through something that is great, I want you to say, God, thank you. And tomorrow, when you go through something that is awful, I want you to say, God, thank you. Because God, I realize that this is just another step to get me to where you want me to be. This isn't bewitched. God's not going to just twinkle His nose and poof, you're there. God says, I'm going to grow you that way. These are the steps you're going to have to take. This is the process you're going to have to go through. Could Joseph have just grown up? I mean, it'd been much easier, right? Much simpler story. Had Joseph just got grown and looked at his dad and said, hey, Dad, I heard there's a great job opportunity down in Egypt. I can be second in command. I'm just going to move down there. That would have been nice, wouldn't it? Simple. The family would have thrown him a party. Everybody sent him off. That is not how it worked. So guys, whatever you're facing right now, I want you to realize that God's still God. And that He knew you were going to be in this place, in this moment, long before you were even born. And don't forget that. And I know that it's easy to forget. Guys, I've been there. I'm not the guy that can sit up here and I'm just making up stuff, acting like I think I know what it's like. I've lived through those bad days. I was there. Still go through them occasionally. You know, one of those days that it's really hard for me to remember anything before September 20th, 1984. And that's when my brother had his car wreck. And he spent about the next 2 years in hospital. And I don't remember much of anything before that. Don't remember my brother before that. I was 7 years old. I ought to have memories before I was 7. Don't you think? Ashley, you're the mind person. I should know that, shouldn't I? Yeah, probably blocked them out. But one thing I can certainly remember is I still remember in absolute vivid color the state trooper knocking on our door, asking my mom if we owned a Ford pickup truck. And this was right after Mom had gotten off the phone with my brother's boss that said, is Tim okay? And she said, well, he ought to be at work. And he said he never made it. She got off the phone with him, and there was a knock on the door, and it was a state trooper. And I can still remember my mom was cooking supper, and she just immediately broke down and started crying. And he said, is this the car you're going to be driving to the hospital? And she said, yes. And he said, well, I'll radio ahead so that no one will stop you. And then with these days before cell phones, I can remember my dad pulling up in a blue pickup truck that he drove to work. I still remember where he pulled at in the driveway as I ran out, and he said, where's your mom? And I said, Tim had a wreck. I can remember those things. I can remember missing him for 2 years almost as he was in the hospital. Multiple times thought he was going to die. And he's still here. And he is a much better person today than he would have ever been had he not had the wreck. I mean, he is daylight and dark different. His commitment to God was almost non-existent prior to the wreck. Today, he is as committed as anyone I know. So guys, we've been there. Every one of us, we could go around the room and pull out our bad days, couldn't we? You got them? Anybody got them? Days you wish you could just go back and forget. Those are probably the days we don't need to forget. Those are the days we need to look back on and say, you know what? On that day, God was God. And He had a plan. He had a plan in the past. Whatever I'm going through now, He's still got a plan. Whatever I'm going to go through next month, He's still got a plan. Now, that's where it gets even harder with our faith. Faith's not easy, is it? Faith is hard. Because what's God's plan? I don't know what God's plan is. We naturally assume that God's plan is for everything to turn out like a Hallmark movie, don't we? Right? I mean, just be honest. We sit around in churches all the time, or we listen to church folks talk, and they want to be positive, and they all say, well, it's going to work out. God's got a plan. And when they say work out, it's going to work out the way you want it to. God did not come up with the Hallmark Channel. I'm sure He just allowed it. It was not His plan. Because life is not a Hallmark movie. Sometimes God's plan is for you to lose that job. Sometimes God's plan is for you to not get well, or for you to have financial struggles, or for you to have this issue, or for you to have that issue. Sometimes that's God's plan. And it's got to be okay. And sometimes God's plan is for you to get the promotion. Sometimes His plan is for you to have super strength and grow and get well and get healthy and all those things. Sometimes it's for you to not have any financial issues. Sometimes that's His plan. I don't ever know. But God's got a plan. It's when we start interfering and try to interfere that we get awfully confused, right? For instance, yesterday, I'll tell this joke. I try to remember it. So, this is a joke told by Jack LaLanne. And so, he tells this joke. This guy was 40 years old and went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you need to get healthy. You're looking like an 80-year-old. Your health is. So the guy, he goes out, he puts on muscle, he gets strong, he gets healthy, all these things. He's just in great shape. And he rocks on, and he's about 80 years old at this point, and he looks in the mirror one day, and his body's in good shape, and he just looks at his face, and he's just like, my goodness, I'm an old man. So he goes to the doctor and he gets plastic surgery. He gets facelift and Botox everywhere. I mean, he's looking great. Look in the mirror, looks like a 40-year-old. Walks across the street, gets hit by a bus, dead. And on his way to heaven, he looks at God and he says, God, why me? And God looked at him and he said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you. It's when we start interjecting ourselves into God's plan and we start trying to tweak it that we get in trouble, right? So guys, this week, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take stock of your life and look back over your life and say, okay, here are the times that were great and how God used them. And then I want you to look back over time and say, here are the bad times in life, and this is how God used them as well. Because what you'll find is that He did, right? God uses good times and bad times. God sent me to Marvel, Arkansas. And if He can make something good come out of Marvel, Arkansas, guys, there is no telling what He can do with your life. No telling. Now, granted, I got Chris, and 8 months later, we were gone. I mean, it was like, all right, thank you, God, let's move. But God can do something with your life, and He's got a plan for it. But it's not coincidence. God's in charge. God is making things happen the way He wants them when He wants them. And that can be tough for us to swallow during the bad times especially. But I encourage you to do that. All right, let me pray for us.